welcome to this month's council work session. And we're getting our quarterly NBD update? All right, so Mayor Warren and Commissioner Kirkmeyer, you want to take it away?
Sure. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to present. I know that Commissioner Kirkmeyer has a number of different items that he has on his agenda today, but there is something that has been, that I know that a lot of council members as well as the mayor's office have received a number of calls, and we talked about this yesterday on this issue of eviction of the gentleman on Brown Street. We want you to know that we are working with him to try to either get him permanent housing, or to work with his landlord to get some support. We have been in touch with Catholic Family Center as well, and we believe that we may have a solution. We're trying to reach the landlord to deal with that. So we just want you to know that we are working on this, and hopefully we'll have a resolution that we can provide to you very soon.
Okay, you all set, Mayor?
Yep.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to share my screen here, just a quick PowerPoint that we'll go through. So here are the topics that we have today. Oh, wait a minute. There we go. The topics today, we'll just give you a quick land management update. It won't take us very long to do that. We'll talk about the CARES Act funding. We did provide you with the October update. You know, you had asked for a monthly update on the spending there, so we'll talk about that real quick. We want to spend a little time talking about the emergency abatement policy that's in the final draft form for you to review and weigh in on. And then we want to talk a little bit about the urban renewal districts that are timing out and what action we have to take in response to that. And then I'll try to get through most of that quickly so we can spend whatever time you want on the rent assistance subject. So I think some of this you already know. You know, we went through an exhaustive process to seek a vendor to provide us with a land management solution. And again, land management is basically a solution, an enterprise solution for front end users, of which NBD is all front end users. In that process, we had 16 vendors respond to the RFP process. We narrowed that down to 4 vendors and then went through some scripted demos whereby 2 were eliminated because they couldn't meet even our basic needs. So we went through a process, and then from the 2, we had a second set of scripted demos. And the result of that was we were recommending Amanda at that point. What happened thereafter, we were in contract negotiations. And as you know, we had a council item that we held last month. And that's because it was determined subsequent to those actions that in the second scripted demo that Amanda they did what was considered a customization change to their existing off-the-shelf solution. And our RFP was pretty specific about having off-the-shelf solutions and no customization. So we had to go back to square one with those 2 vendors. We did that this week. We had them have an equitable, equal opportunity to produce the same results and really address the one area that was least efficient with both of the vendors and really all vendors in this space is because what we do in our C of O program and go into large buildings and cite lots of violations at one time, the complexities of that are really not out there yet in the software world because not a lot of cities are in that space yet. But we sold them on the values of them getting that perfected, because if they can perfect that model with us, as many cities as we engage on those processes, that's going to serve them very well in the future, because lots of cities want to do what we do and they're all looking for an efficient, effective way to do it. So we went through that process. We now know that we are going to still recommend Amanda. You'll be getting, that'll be coming back to you either January or February, depending on the timing of it. And then for Amanda, it's going to be a 16-month implementation process. That's their schedule. So it shouldn't take us too long to get actively involved here. The big lift will be data conversion, data transfer, data migration. And we're going through a lot of steps right now to clean data and make sure that we start off on the right foot. Any questions about land management before I move on? It's just a quick update. And then this,
Commissioner,
yeah,
I had something. You had asked us to hold this item until January. Are you now asking people to consider it for December's council meeting?
no, we still have to finalize negotiations and
Okay.
work on that. So probably January is the best we can do to get back to you. And so this information is not new.
Sorry, Commissioner
Oh, go
Kirkmeyer,
ahead.
I had a question too. How does the system fit in with like building blocks?
So building blocks is a data platform. So it's basically, you can take any system and right now we're using multiple systems to feed that data, not just us, it's got data from crime, it's got all kinds of data in it. So that's just a data depository that allows you to use it in a constructive way to do some really unique and strategic searches when you have all the data in there. It remains to be seen if the front end solution is going to provide us an opportunity to have within that system a data platform, or if it's just going to feed building blocks as our data platform. So we don't know the answer to that yet, but what we do know is we're not going to go backwards. So we want to be even more transparent. We want to have efficient, effective, public accessible processes that will serve people in a much more effective manner. And we want to have the data still out there even more so. So this is the CARES Act, the summary update as the end of October. This is the report that you all just received. So this is not new to you, but I thought I would put it up here just to give you some opportunity if you wanted to talk about anything specific with respect to this effort. I will note, the 34 families with rent assistance, remember, that's our funding. And our funding right now is only used when the EPI funding, the county's funding, cannot be used. So it's very, very few incidences where that occurs. And our goal right now as a community is to spend down that $4.3 million that the county has allocated to rent assistance so that our money goes further thereafter. So again, this is not new. We've assisted at this point, end of October, 459 businesses. And remember that this data is all the way through the process. That means, payments have gone out. There's a lot more activity going on in the process. 1,800 seniors have been served. Right now, we're actually over 14,000 meals delivered. We're winding down that program. There's only a couple of restaurant operators who have not met their max in the initial restaurant grant program, but we'll be coming to council in December to reestablish that program and with a twice the dedicated financial effort. So again, it's like 34 families with rent assistance, 175 families legal assistance, 183 families have been homelessness prevention efforts, 17 families with foreclosure prevention. You see all the seniors that we've been able to help. One of the other things that you'll see on the council item coming for the round 3 CDBG is some extra money for lifespan because of all the wonderful work they've been doing with seniors. And then you can see how many individuals have been helped with emergency shelter, rapid rehousing, street outreach. And then the housing opportunity for people with AIDS, 30 individuals. So again, this is just a summary you already have. I just wanted to have it on here. I don't know if anybody has any specific questions they wanted to
I've got a couple of questions just for clarification. I'm going to go back. So how does preventing homelessness differ from preventing eviction?
Carol, you want to respond to that? You might be on mute, Carol.
Okay. When we speak of preventing homelessness, that can be rental arrears assistance so that, people, they don't lose their housing. So that is preventing homelessness. And what was the other question? I'm sorry.
I wanted to know how preventing eviction is different from preventing homelessness.
And sometimes it can be the same, but also it very well could be if a person is they're about to lose their housing and they can't remain in the housing that they're in, then there is assistance that's available to help them be relocated into another permanent housing solution. So
So if somebody was about to lose their house and be evicted and had nowhere to go, which of those two would they be in?
it
The
really
prevent,
it kind of depends on their particular situation. In the event that they have another unit that they're able to move in and it's just really a need for a security deposit, then they could receive a security deposit to help them relocate into a new unit. But in the event, say for instance, if they have arrears and they needed that to be repaid to prevent them from being evicted, that's a possibility. Or if for whatever reason they are not able to secure permanent housing, then they are needing to go into a homeless shelter. And then if they're in a homeless shelter, the goal is to ultimately serve them in such a way that they will eventually get into permanent housing.
okay. So, all right, maybe I'll ask it a different way,
Okay.
just to have a clear understanding. Of those categories, say rent assistance, legal assistance to prevent eviction, preventing homelessness, are those the same people? Could that be the same family in all of those? Are there double counting in
No,
the?
these are not double counted.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
and I think the easiest way to relate it to this data is these are specific efforts with specific agencies that do
Okay,
different things. So yeah,
okay, got it.
double counting them.
All right.
Anything
Okay.
else on?
No, I'm good with that. Thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner, I have
Oh.
one question on that last slide. So I know when the Meals for Seniors program started, I know there was a lot of backlog because there was so much demand. Do you find, I mean, if you're coming to us asking for more funding, I'm assuming that all the kinks were worked out and that in the end, both the restaurants and the seniors found it to be an advantageous program?
Oh, yes, to a very, very great extent. It's been probably the most successful program on all with respect to everybody involved, both the vendor and the customers. High marks of praise in that program.
And how about 211? I know.
And 211, yeah. And so 211, so there are some things that we're, obviously everything you're trying to do here is, this has been a pretty rushed year, right? I mean, we got money out pretty quickly, and did so with some very new and unique and different programs. And so this was one of those. And so our partnership with 211 was a learning experience for all of us. But we learned very quickly that in order to have it most effective and most efficient, that it would help us to be able to schedule X amount of meals, but now more, because the conversation goes longer on the phone, and to have enough choices, but no more, because the more choices you have, the longer the conversation is. So we're doing some things a little bit differently on this side. Like we had all 3 meal options, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We're going to go with just lunch and dinner because that was predominantly what everybody was interested in anyway. But it just eliminates one piece of the conversation to shrink the length of the call. And then what we're going to do is take these 1,800, or it could be even 2,000 at this point, however many seniors have already been in the program, we plan to send them the menus ahead of time so that they're prepared to that's the best we can do with the known population of people we're serving. And then as we have others that call, we'll do the same thing with them so that if they have to do a subsequent call, because we plan on trying to do this for 4 months. So, we'll try to make sure that these calls get minimized so that the log jam doesn't exist. But they work those out early on in the process. And I think, I know it was highly successful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else on this?
Can I just add something to that, Commissioner Kirkmeyer?
Yeah.
The part of our program, it provides an opportunity to, stay open, and the other part is to feed our seniors. But in addition to that, I wish you could hear some of the calls that I've gotten from every quad, not just one, thanking the city of Rochester for providing these meals. The call that gets most to my staff and to me is when I hear from seniors that say they haven't had interaction with a human being for a long time because they're protecting themselves in their circles. And to get a knock on the door with a warm meal from a local restaurant just means the world to them. So I want to thank City Council for your support.
Appreciate that, Daisy. Thank you. So now on the emergency abatement policy. So just to refresh your memory, we have 2 grant programs that come, well, there's 3 grant programs that come from the state for our vacant property program. One is land bank funding, but the other 2 is City Rise and Zombie. And what we wanted to do with the most recent grants is to develop a sustainable fund that could allow us to do more in terms of violation mitigation, especially hazardous violation mitigation. We've always been in the business of cutting grass, picking up trash, and boarding up buildings, but it's a rare occasion, and we really had to operate beyond any policy to get involved with anything other than those items. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Most of it is funding related. But we saw this as a good opportunity to start a program that can replenish itself through the collection of the associated bills that will go out. And, theoretically over time, this should be a sustainable effort. So there's 2 different programs, one Zombie, one City Rise, and they are dealing with 2 distinctly different situations. One is vacant properties and one is occupied properties. And so, the policy goal is obviously to abate hazards so that they don't, displace the innocent victim, i.e. the occupant. We want to make sure that our vacant structures, because they are substantially less than they used to be, and just to give you some updated information on that, we're at 36% reduction in vacant structures since 2015, and they continue to go down. So that's a really wonderful thing for all of us. And then, we want to make sure that in this process, we bill and we recoup the funds, and then we set up a financial structure on the back end that replenishes these funds. We created a committee to talk not only about this, but about other subjects that are coming down the pipe, like property manager licensing. And that committee is comprised of a council rep. We have all of the leaders of the known landlord associations. We have the reps from the 3 recognized tenant advocacy groups, the ones that we engaged in the City Rise Phase 2 process. And then we randomly selected some landlords, both small investors and larger investors, to be part of the team. And so we've had a couple of meetings and we discussed this policy, and we got to a point where there were no other questions, comments, issues that they had. So now we're moving forward with it to you. So on the vacant structures, it's important to note that we can't use the Zombie money to fix a vacant property. That's not what the Zombie dollars are for. But what we can use the Zombie dollars for is to stabilize a property. And why do we want to do that? So it doesn't have to be demolished, for the most part. So we want to be able to take like a situation where maybe this is a foreclosure, the property's in okay condition otherwise, but the porch is falling off and it's stuck in the private foreclosure process, and we don't want it to get worse. Well, we can go on and mitigate that hazard so that it preserves the property. Should we have to foreclose on it in the tax foreclosure process, we'll still have an asset that's we can either put into our owner occupancy programs, or that we can have, an investor purchase at the tax sale. Either way, it preserves the property and from needing to be demolished. We've had some situations where a vacant property, some issues associated with, were causing a nuisance to the adjoining neighbors, that have to be subjected to seeing that vacant property for too long. And so some of it is going to be targeted to that, to try to mitigate something that, right now we can go out and ticket that issue. But, in the future here, we'll be able to do something more than that for some of the issues that are directly related to us to be able to sustain the property. So things like if the property, let's say it's a decent property, but we've had to board up the first floor, but our, policy is we don't internally board up second floors. Well, if that's exposed to the elements and we want to preserve the property, we could take the action to have somebody in the private sector secure that, build the property, property doesn't pay it, it'll get paid when the taxes get paid, and the fund will get replenished. So that's on the vacant side. On the occupied side, it's all about, preserving and avoiding displacement where we can. So, these top violations are what we call reoccurring violations. One of the things that we worked out with the tenants union a while back during the City Rise Phase 2 engagement was there were a lot of situations where we would get involved, and the thing with whatever the issue was, it would get fixed, at least visually get fixed. And then, 2 months later, it would reappear because the fix was not thorough enough to make it a lasting repair. And it's difficult for code enforcement who have to operate with their eyes and ears. And, we don't take mechanical equipment apart. We just, if it turns on and it's pumping out heat, then it's working. So this allowed us to address things that continue to cause pain for the occupant and pain for code enforcement, because we have to keep revisiting it. So what we've done with these top violations is we basically have a policy now that says if we have to come out here for that same issue, now our expectation for abating that is you have to have a contractor, a reputable contractor that tells us what work they did and how they made that repair so that it's not going to break again. And so that's existing now. But what this is going to do is this is going to take those same violations, and in the event that the owner chooses not to follow up to make the repair, then we would contract out with somebody to make the repair and bill the owner. In addition to those violations, on the bottom are what we call immediate hazard violations. And again, these are the type of violations that if we don't get quick response from somebody, then the occupant is being subjected to either living in a hazard or removing themselves from the property. And so these are things that, only have to happen once. And if we don't get an immediate response, then we will use this program to make that repair and bill the owner. So, I won't get too much in detail with this, but it's a really simplified process. We get dispatched there. It doesn't matter if it's a complaint, a referral, it could be a C of O inspection. If there's some issue that applies in accordance with the policy, and the notice and order has been issued and the codified time frame has expired, and the owner or the manager, the responsible party, is not communicating, progressing, or have a plan, then, in an occupied situation, if that issue is posing a hazard to the occupant, then this process can be initiated. The inspector would do that through their supervisor, who would then work with our rehab unit to dispatch a contractor to get quotes. And then, through authorization from the occupant, because we have to be able to get inside the place along with the contractor, we want to be assured of two things. Let me just stop for a minute and say this. We want to be assured that the tenant does want to stay, because sometimes the tenant doesn't want to stay, because we want to make sure that in our limited capacity to do this, it's impactful. So what's impactful? It's accomplishing the goal of avoiding displacement. So we want the tenant to express to us that they do want to stay if that issue got resolved. And then the tenant obviously has to cooperate, because they're the only ones that can legally allow both us in and the contractor in. So that'll have to be built into the process when we engage the tenant. But assuming that happens, then we'll do that. We'll get quotes. We'll send out a contractor to make the repair. We'll bill the owner. And if the bill doesn't get paid, it will be subject to being added to the property tax. So that's we did send you the policy itself. I don't know if you've had time to see it or read it, but I won't get off this subject just yet. But this is kind of a simple version of what we sent you, and you have the whole policy. So I don't know if you have any questions about this before we move on.
What kind of feedback have you gotten about it?
From who?
Probably from all the above.
Well, I mean, the good thing about having landlords at the table is, this is not going to apply to the average landlord, right? I mean, are there some people that need to enhance their business model? Yeah, absolutely. But we are blessed in this area to have a really solid base of local dedicated investors that tend to their business when they have to, and this would not apply to them. they're responsive, they show up, they fix things in a timely manner, and this won't apply to them. So when you have those, folks that are in the business and they're reasonable and they're at the table, they're not afraid of this. They're not, this is in many respects a leveling of the playing field. This is, similar to what we think about a property manager licensing. It's accountability measures that level the playing field so that everybody is subjected to the same rules. And, the landlords that tend to their business, they already operate in a way that they meet the expectations. So the more that we can zero in on those that choose not to, I think, this further discourages that behavior. So I think we're in good shape with landlords. Tenants, I mean, this is aligned very well with, the tenant union and the other advocates, interest in avoiding innocent people being displaced for reasons beyond their control. So I think it aligns very well with those goals.
So just to be more explicit, the issues that happened over the last, 2 to 3 years with some of the landlords who do not fit the description that you gave previously. This policy, I mean, everybody who's been around the table would agree this policy, if it was enacted 3 years ago, like it would have addressed those things in a timely enough fashion.
Yes. So, and that's really the point, is the timeliness. So we ultimately did get involved with some of those situations, even though
I know. Yeah,
even though we didn't have a policy or funding to do so, we had to kind of craft it as we went, so to speak. So this kind of legitimizes and proceduralizes how we can do that and exercise the authority that we already have under the charter and the code. We already have the authority to bait a nuisance when somebody fails to do so. So now we're just constructing a process that has fair and reasonable expectations. Because the other thing is, and probably the only slippery slope here, is over-promising and under-delivering. So we want to make, one of the things is we're starting out with 2 or more families, because we just don't know how much we're going to get dragged into this. And you have to remember, this doesn't come with extra staff. There's no extra staff associated with this. This is the same people who, quite frankly, are overworked to begin with, just extending additional time to prioritize these situations to help tenants in this scenario. So we don't know what the demand will be that applies to the exact parameters of the policy. So we're starting off in a way that can paint reasonable expectations so that we're not failing in the eyes of some.
Thanks.
Commissioner, I want to say thank you for your work in basically codifying that process. I think that will be very helpful in addressing some of the concerns that we've had previously and making the path to correction clearer for everybody. You mentioned property management license. Are we going to talk about that, or is that done? Where do we stand with that?
No, not today. We're not going to talk about it, but we are starting that conversation. So that committee that we put together, that's the next subject we're going to tackle. So we have a really draft piece of legislation that law is reviewing as part of that, but we're we'll share it with that committee, and then we'll start to get into that. I don't know, Henry, are we on this schedule yet with that first meeting?
Yeah, we should be meeting in early December.
Okay. So
okay,
yeah, so
yeah.
And we'll keep you up to date, and one city council members on the committee as well, so we'll be able to get updates.
Okay.
I have a
Anything else,
question.
Okay.
Oh,
go ahead.
So I'm sorry, my phone died and I missed, I may have missed a slide, but did you talk about how many people you have been able to help with this policy?
It's not in place yet, so anything that we've done on this end of things has been kind of constructed as we go, and it's been extremely limited to whatever resources we could get our hands on. We didn't have funding to do this, so the only resources that we budget for things like this is grass, trash, and board up. So this actually establishes a budget line to be able to do this. So, we haven't begun yet.
The other question is, I know we had talked about this before, where the some of the funding available for rent assistance doesn't apply if there's violations on the property. And I think there's been some effort to get waivers, and promises to fix it, but has there been any need to or see any connection where this program would be helpful in addressing some of those issues that may come up that would prevent a tenant from getting rent assistance because of some habitability issues?
Yeah, I think, well, just let me get you up to speed with that specific topic. There hasn't been any of those situations in the last 3 weeks, just so you know. We had, there's these federal guidelines say that to distribute money to housing, they want to make sure the housing is habitable. So it's really it's not about code violations, it's about health and safety code violations in a particular unit. So what we did after the initial, after we started the rent assistance process, we worked out with Catholic Family Center a process by which they advise us when that obstacle is presented. In other words, everything else is good to go except for they believe there's code violations. And they tell us that, and we look at the case itself specific to health and safety. And if there is health and safety issues in that unit, we contact the responsible party and tell them that those are causing an issue with them being able to be in line to get, rent arrears. And so if and when a responsible party chooses not to go down that path, then we will make that painfully apparent to the people that might be most interested in that for the adjudication process. So the truth is, I think that, where this could possibly play a role, we have this intimate relationship with DHS that sends out rent withholding notices for health and safety violations. And that process works really, really well. It really drives a lot of the compliance, especially in our more challenged areas. And this could probably help where that doesn't trigger the necessary response. So I think that this could definitely set us up to kind of using some existing processes to identify potential units where this could apply. But it's going to also require, the tenant's participation, a lot of things that, the average person doesn't get to see, and we're, intimately involved with thousands of these cases, is sometimes a tenant just doesn't want to stay there. And there's lots of reasons why. It's not always because of code violations. Sometimes they just don't want to stay there. They want to go. So, but where the tenant wants to stay, I could see this, helping us out with some existing policies to help, navigate that.
That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I'm just going to speak quickly to this. I don't know if Tom Worth was able to join us or not, but we asked.
I'm here.
Oh, you are? Okay, good, Tom. So in case any questions come up, because this is something he may have to weigh in on. But the bottom line is we're coming to council because we have 6 urban renewal districts that have expired. And so what does that mean from us? So from an application perspective, these districts are portrayed on our zoning map. And where they're expired, they're falsely portrayed as applicable code that no longer applies because they've expired. So it really is a hindrance to both staff facilitating the zoning processes and our customers who have to navigate the applicable codes that apply to the various sections of the city that they may want to, submit permits for. So we're really needing to clean that map up, which is the most important thing for us to make it accurate. And so we have 6 districts that have expired. There's 12 that have not expired. These are 40-year time limit set urban renewal plans. The understanding that we have is legally, there is not really a process to extend an expired district. You would have to go through the same process of adopting the district, which is a pretty exhaustive process. So we just wanted to get this subject on here for any dialogue or conversation you want to have. Because I think it's is it on the council agenda for December? I can't remember. It's coming up.
Yes, it is.
Yes. Okay. So that's why it's on here. We've got Tom Worth, who's our legal expert on the subject. Jill's on the call as well. So I don't know if anybody had any questions, comments, concerns about the need for removing these expired districts.
I'm not clear about what is the value of one way or the other. if they're expired, is there any value in reestablishing them? Or is there some downside to not having, I don't know enough about the context.
So I guess that would require us to do, a thorough investigation about, what's happened, what's transpired in this area over the 40 years. What were the initial goals? Were they met? Are they still yet to be achieved? Is there still gains to be? I think you would go through the same kind of assessment that you would for any area that we might be interested in designating as such. But for our immediate purposes, they're inaccurately portraying something that doesn't legally apply. So we got to do some cleanup, but we can spend some time and energy looking at, those other dynamics, what has occurred, what were the goals, how did we do in terms of the data? But that's going to be a pretty exhaustive process.
So your point is there is a disadvantage to having them show in their current state.
Yeah, absolutely, because they're not applicable legally.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we could, if council is interested, I mean, we could start a process to look deeper into each of them in terms of, again, what were the goals, what was accomplished, how is that area now versus 40 years ago, and whether or not, it needs to be, considered for any additional action.
But to be clear,
are there any resources tied to any of that? I mean, so if you find out that we didn't achieve all the goals, is there some pot that you go to and say, okay, well,
we have no pots.
Okay, all right. Because otherwise, I just have to kind of wonder about the value even of that exercise. But I understand what your immediate need is.
Okay.
So the proposed, just so I'm clear about this, the proposal is to allow these 6 to expire.
No, they're already expired. We need to remove them from the map and from the reference in the zoning code.
Got it.
One
Anything
more
else?
question. Related to the 12 urban renewal districts that have not expired, could we get a sense of the timeline on those and, how far are they into that 40 years and whether or not there's any value to exploring an extension or letting those expire as well?
Yeah, we can give you a summary update on all of them. I think we may have already done that in this review, but we'll get that to council. Anything else on this? Okay. So on the rent assistance topic, this is some of this information you already have. I just wanted to start with some of the information that you may have already been presented, although some of it's changed since I think we sent that email out because another week has passed. So we did that same summary update that we sent to council. We did send to the landlords and property managers. We have a database. I think it's in excess of 600 or so emails that we did send that information out. We do feel like now, this EPI funding will be spent by December 31st. That's not the position we were in, quite frankly, 2 weeks ago. So that's a positive. As of the end of last week, we had over 3,800 applications through all 10 of the intake providers, and they paid out $735,000 to date as of last Friday. The average need, which was in the first month around $1,750, has bumped up to $2,300, but that still, I think, pales in comparison to what most people thought it would be. So that's what's going on with that. And then as of last week, we got the average down to 21 days to close cases. There's lots of variables in terms of what determines when a case gets closed. And it does, it is dependent on a lot of continued engagement, often with information that's needed. So I think the next slide talks about the denial part of it. So this also is not new. This was also in the summary, but there's some percentages here that weren't in the summary. So on the denial side, the first 3 categories make up about 45% of the denials. the no 14-day notice was really something that was triggered more often in the beginning before EPI funding was not only available, but was recognized to not have to follow that requirement. And so, you know, that's kind of a thing of the past with EPI money, because I don't think there's been any no 14-day notice denial in the last couple of weeks. There's over income situations. And then, you know, again, the majority of the funding, which all comes from the federal government, you know, it talks about an occupant's ability to sustain the unit thereafter. It's not just about rent arrears. It's not just about catching up. It's about their capacity to pay rent going forward too, because the goals are to prevent homelessness. And so that comes into play sometimes. And where that's not possible, then we have things like DHS kicking in and a more permanent fix, or at least a longer term fix to a solution that's not short-term problem. And then, you know, about a quarter of these things are duplicate submittals, and that's probably because of the length of time it takes to facilitate the process. One of the things I think that we want to make sure we keep doing in terms of our communication is, you know, telling landlords that a lot of this has to do with, you know, again, continued engagement and contact and communication, whether it's a landlord or the last bullet there. A lot of times they're having a hard time closing the loops at the end with the applicant. And we know there's a lot of reasons for that. You know, people may or may not have cell phones. People may not have an ability to get contacted with, but I think we need to, if we're talking to advocate groups, if we're talking to residents, we need to make sure that impress upon them that they need to keep checking on this process, that, you know, there might be a need for them to communicate thereafter. And we don't want them to just come out of the system, if you will, because we can't connect with them. And then, you know, one of the most recent updates and the positive thing is the last week. So last week, both the application intake and the amount that went out doubled from the week before. So we're looking to keep that trend going. And I think similar to the meal program, where, you know, it's always a little bumpy start. Hopefully we're seeing a good positive trend in that it's going in the right direction, because last week's numbers absolutely indicate that. But we're keeping a weekly eye on it. And I'll stop sharing now, because that's the PowerPoint, but we can talk about whatever's on your mind.
Commissioner, I'm so sorry to have to go back to a couple slides. When my phone died, I had a question. It was on the slide where you had listed out kind of the statistics of who you've been able to help. And there was a line item for keeping seniors in their homes. And I was wondering what program that was.
Okay, I think you're talking about, let me bring that back up. I think it's,
yeah, the 3736 senior homeowners.
So I'll try to speak to this, and then I'll ask Carol to speak to it. This is basically our lifespan effort that they're continuously doing. Again, our council item that's coming in December with the round 3 of CDBG, we're asking for another $50,000 to go to them because of, all the wonderful things they're doing with our seniors. But I think this is part of their effort, is to, serve our seniors in a way that allows them to stay in their home. But Carol, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, it is making sure that they have food on a regular basis. And this is over and above what the restaurant brand is actually doing. It's actually carrying, perishable foods to them that they may be able to prepare in their home. It's also delivering of prescriptions and whatever else that they may need in order to remain successful in their home.
And Carol, isn't it also like grab bars and all the safety things that, situate people to be safe? Can you hear me, Carol? Oh, I lost her sound, but I think it's also that stuff. I don't know if you've ever seen that kind of service, but it's a wonderful service that, you know, they provide to go out and eliminate hazards, if you will.
Yes, it's to age in place. So Lifespan actually sends out, they have social workers on staff that work with the families, work with the senior to see what they need in their home to age in place. So if they need a ramp or need to have a lift bar or a chair in the shower, those types of little small things that we can do or they can do through the funding that we provide to help the senior age in place and be able to remain in the home safely is what that program does.
Right, and the funds that was identified on the screen was really what the CARES Act dollars was actually providing. So this is working in conjunction with the program that's currently in place to do all those things that the mayor just mentioned.
Amazing, thank you.
I want to go back just momentarily to the screen about the group, the landlord group.
Mm-hmm.
You remember we got that long email after the forum.
Yeah.
So I wonder, how are the people who were commenting on that connected to the landlord group, or are they not? Or how, it seems that there's a disconnect.
Well, there's some are and some aren't. So there's, you know, when we constructed the committee, we started with the people we had been engaging in City Rise Phase 2, which was our tenant advocacy groups and our landlord leaders of the organizations that we recognize. But for this committee, we wanted to broaden it to people that may not participate in the various landlord associations. So we had the computer do a random poll of the participants of the landlord summit. And we did it in two ways. We did it with small investors, so those that only owned a couple of properties, and those that own a lot of units. And so, you know, we built this to be as diverse as it can be from different perspectives, and try to eliminate more than one person from the same organization being at the table so that everybody is equitably represented.
In the committee that you have set up, are tenant groups represented as well? I think.
Yeah, so Ryan's involved, Ibero's involved, and Rochester Refugee Resettlement's involved.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I have one, and it's less involved with the NBD's work explicitly and more just tangentially. I'm really concerned, all this good work that you all have done, that a lot of other folks have done regarding the skip court that you know, that Mayor Warren was presented at when it announced. It seems like the most recent stuff is that they're going to be moving most of these hearings to digital or virtual. So I know that we don't get to control anything about the courts or how these things change, but I mean, what's the sense of how we build off the foundation that was generated from the skip court to make sure that we're really creating a one-stop shop for resources for all the folks who are being impacted by the crisis right now?
I don't know, Mayor, if you wanted to comment on that.
So I think that the way that we do that is have all those people be available via Zoom if the courts go back to virtual courts, virtual hearings, and having that access. And unfortunately, we do not know if the courts are going to shut down, but if there are issues that people have because of the number of different other programs that we have that will be connecting either with DHS or our not-for-profit organizations and you know, the legal representatives that they may have access to, we hope to not lose anybody in the process. And so there are a number of different places that people can land. And so we're hopeful that what we have, that because it's not just one place that they can get these services, that they can get that support in other ways throughout the community through programs that we already have established.
And thank you, Mayor. How much of this stuff is just the state judicial system just telling us this is how it's got to be, and how much of it is there a chance for any type of conversation between the different structures like city and county court and the different administrations? I mean, do we have a chance
As it
to
pertains
mold?
to the one-stop shopping, the one-stop, sort of support, or
As it,
what's
like when things go virtual, when things are when things are heard, is that all just comes at us and we just have to deal with it?
Yes. Remember, there's different branches of government, and the judicial branch is controlled by, the other, by the chief judge, and the chief judge will decide when court is to be closed, or the administrative law judge in our area will do that. And our judges will have to comply. We're hopeful because of the first phase of this, when people were able to go to virtual, there were other opportunities for people to have access to the court system, that they probably would do that because they've already done it before. But when that happens, we're not sure. We thought that it might have happened if we went to orange, but it seems that we're holding steady at yellow right now. So I'm not sure, but that is definitely dictated either by the governor's office or the chief judge.
Got it.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns? If not, again, I want to thank you all. Thank you, Commissioner, certainly for the great work that you all continue to do, Mayor. I appreciate you all.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Stay safe.
Thanksgiving 2020. Okay, we're gonna set a new standard.
Right. It's going out like the way it came in, right?
Yeah.
All right.
All right, good night, everyone.